The massive crystal chamber on Zentari Prime buzzed with alien voices as hundreds of species gathered for what would become the most important meeting in galactic history. The air felt thick and heavy as translation devices worked overtime to convert dozens of languages into something everyone could understand. Jake Morrison stood perfectly still in his blue uniform, watching the alien delegates with careful eyes. Next to him, Lisa Bennett checked her datapad one more time while Henry Clark kept his hands behind his back like a soldier should. The three humans looked tiny compared to the massive chamber around them. Towering crystal walls rose up into darkness above their heads, and strange lights danced across surfaces that seemed to shift and move on their own. This was the heart of galactic power, where decisions were made that affected billions of lives across the stars. Today, those decisions would change everything. Amanda Foster stepped forward when the speaker called for attention. She had been Earth's voice in this place for 5 years, always careful to follow their rules and speak their language of diplomacy. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple style that made her look professional, but not threatening. The aliens seemed to like humans who didn't stand out too much. The speaker was a Zentari, one of the oldest and most powerful species in the council. It stood 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin that looked like black glass. When it spoke, its voice came through the translation system as cold and formal. The speaker raised all 4 hands and the massive chamber fell silent. The species known as humans must answer for their crimes against galactic law, the speaker announced. Its words echoed off the crystal walls and came back as whispers from every direction. You have violated Protocol 7 Alpha repeatedly, and without regard for the safety of other species. Amanda felt her heart beating faster but kept her voice steady. Honored speaker, we ask what crimes you speak of. Humanity has followed all council laws since joining this body. A sharp clicking sound came from the insect-like Vescan delegation. Their representative looked like a giant mantis with too many eyes, each one reflecting the chamber's strange lights. Your species continues to live on worlds that should kill any thinking being, the Vescan said through clicking mandibles. You spread to planets that are classified as Deathworlds and act like this is normal behavior. More voices joined in from around the chamber. The Aquans floated in their water-filled helmets, their gills moving rapidly as they spoke of human, ocean colonies on worlds with crushing depths and poisonous seas. The energy beings called lumens flickered with angry colors as they complained about human electromagnetic signatures, disrupting their meditation. One by one, species after species stood to accuse humanity of the same basic crime, being human. Jake Morrison felt his jaw muscles tighten as he listened to the complaints. These weren't real violations of any law. These were complaints about human nature itself. The fact that humans could survive on worlds that would kill most aliens in minutes wasn't a crime. It was just how humans were built by millions of years of evolution on a planet that tried to kill everything on it. The complaints went on for over an hour. Humans were too adaptable. Humans could survive in too many different environments. Humans built colonies on worlds that should be left empty. Humans expanded too quickly into space that other species were afraid to enter. Each accusation was really the same. Humans were different, and different was dangerous. Henry Clark leaned close to Amanda and whispered something that made her nod. He'd been a soldier for 30 years and knew the difference between a trial and a setup. This wasn't about justice. This was about fear. The speaker raised its hands again, and the chamber became quiet. The council has reached a decision. By vote of all non-human members, humanity is restricted to its current 17 colony worlds. No further expansion will be allowed. All human military ships must stay within designated human space. Any violation will result in expulsion from the council and possible military action. Amanda felt the blood drain from her face. Honored speaker, these restrictions would trap our entire species in a tiny area of space, while other species continue to expand freely. This is not justice. This is imprisonment. The decision is final, the speaker declared. You have 30 standard days to comply with these new restrictions. The chamber erupted in alien voices as delegates discussed the decision. Some sounded pleased while others seemed uncertain. The humans stood in shocked silence as the reality of what had just happened sank in. They had been tried, convicted, and sentenced for the crime of being too good at surviving. As guards escorted the human delegation from the chamber, Jake caught Henry's eye. The older man's face showed the same cold anger that Jake felt building in his chest. They had tried to be good galactic citizens for 20 years, following rules and being polite. Now they were being punished for their very nature. Outside the chamber, Amanda immediately activated her emergency communicator. Priority message to Earth Command. Authorization code Black 77. We need to call the Colonial Assembly right now. The message that would reach every human colony within hours was simple but clear. The galaxy had just declared war on human nature. The aliens were afraid of what humans could do and where they could live. They wanted humanity locked in a box, safe and contained where they couldn't threaten the comfortable order that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Jake looked up at the alien sky above Centauri Prime, with its 3 purple moons and strange constellations. Somewhere out there were 17 human worlds, each one carved out of environments that would kill most of the species in that chamber within hours. Worlds where humans had built cities and farms and families, proving every day that life could flourish in the most impossible places. The aliens thought they were protecting themselves by limiting human expansion. They had no idea what they had actually done. They had just told a species that survived by adapting and overcoming that they were no longer allowed to be themselves. Amanda finished her transmission and looked at her companions. The Colonial Assembly will meet within the week. Every world will send representatives. Henry nodded grimly. They're going to learn something about humans that they should have figured out before they tried to cage us. What's that? Jake asked. That? The species that turned Earth from a death world into a garden doesn't take kindly to being told where we can and can't make our homes. The 30-day deadline suddenly felt very short indeed. The colony ship New Frontier hung in the dark space between stars like a massive metal city. Its hull stretched for 3 kilometers and could house 50,000 people if needed. Today it served a different purpose as representatives from every human world came together for the most important meeting in their species' history. The main conference hall had been cleared of everything except chairs and communication equipment, creating a simple space where the future of humanity would be decided. Paul Carter stood at the front of the room looking out at faces he had known for years. These were not politicians or diplomats who had never felt dirt under their fingernails. These were the people who had built human civilization among the stars with their own hands. Men and women who had survived on worlds that actively tried to kill them every single day. They want us to stop being human, Paul said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. That is what this comes down to. They are afraid of what we are, what we can do, and what we represent to their comfortable little galaxy. Susan Harris raised her hand from her seat near the front. She ran the Titan Station shipyards where humans built vessels tough enough to survive in deep space for decades. The orbital platforms are reporting more council ships every day. They are positioning fleets at the edges of our space. This is not just about economics anymore. They are getting ready to use force. Rachel Torres stood up from her chair in the middle section. She had spent 15 years studying alien species and knew more about their biology than almost any other human. I have been watching them for a long time, trying to understand how they think. The average council species can only survive in very specific conditions. They see our ability to adapt as a threat to everything they have built. The room stirred as people began to understand what Rachel was really saying. The council was not just afraid of human expansion. They were afraid that human adaptability would make their entire way of life obsolete. Bobby Chen activated the holographic display at the front of the room. The 3-dimensional map showed human space as a tiny cluster of stars surrounded by vast territories controlled by council species. We are outnumbered 1,000 to 1 in terms of ships and people, but they have made one very big mistake in their planning. Henry Clark moved to stand beside the display. His military uniform was simple and practical, like everything else, about the man who had spent 40 years defending human colonies. They think we will fight like they do. Big fleet battles in open space, following their rules about how wars should work. They have no idea how people from Deathworlds actually fight when they are cornered. The room became very quiet as delegates began to realize what Henry meant. These were not just administrators and engineers sitting in comfortable offices. Many of them were survivors who had faced down plasma storms, predatory animals, and environmental disasters that would have wiped out entire council civilizations. Nicole Reed laughed from her seat near the back. She governed Green Hell, a jungle, world where the plants actively hunted anything that moved. They have obviously never tried to sleep on a planet where the vegetation wants to eat you. We learned to adapt or die long before we ever left Earth's solar system. Tony Miller nodded in agreement. His mining teams worked in the deep core facilities on Inferno, where surface temperatures could melt most metals. My people work every day in conditions that would turn council species into vapor in seconds. We do not just survive impossible environments, we make them into homes. Amanda Foster had been quiet throughout the discussion, but now she stood with the news that changed everything. I've been talking to certain people within the council who do not agree with the restrictions. 3 species voted against the limits in secret sessions: the Korath warrior merchants, the artificial beings called the Nexus Collective, and the ancient Epic Empire. This information sent whispers through the assembly. The Epic Empire was one of the oldest members of the council. Their representatives almost never spoke and had never taken sides in political disputes before. The Korath message was simple, Amanda continued. They respect strength and see the council's fear of human expansion as weakness. The Nexus Collective finds logical problems with restricting any species based on natural advantages. But the Epoch Empire's message was more interesting. They said that young Deathwalkers remind them of themselves in ancient times. They said the council forgets that comfort makes species weak while hardship makes them strong. Henry stepped forward again. So we are not completely alone, but we cannot count on outside help. The question we have to answer is simple. Do we accept these restrictions and slowly disappear? Or do we remind the galaxy what happens when you corner a species that evolved on a death world? The vote did not take long. Every single representative voted the same way. Jake Morrison had been watching from the back of the hall, and he felt something cold run down his spine when he saw the expressions on the faces around him. He had seen that look before in the eyes of colonists who had survived natural disasters and alien attacks. It was the look of humans who had been pushed beyond their breaking point. As the assembly divided into planning groups, Jake received a transmission from one of the outer colonies. The message was short but told him everything he needed to know. Council enforcement fleet approaching frontier's edge, colony preparing for siege protocols. Governor Martinez says the volcano is not the only thing about to blow up. Rachel Torres joined Jake near the communication station. The council thinks they understand us because they have read our files and watched our diplomatic missions. They have no idea what humans are really capable of when we stop trying to be polite. What do you mean? Jake asked. Every human world was chosen because other species thought it was too dangerous to colonize. We did not just survive on those worlds. We turned them into fortresses without even realizing it. Every mining operation doubles as a weapons factory. Every construction project can be turned into a defensive position. Every environmental adaptation we made can be used against invaders who cannot handle our kind of conditions. Tony Miller overheard their conversation and joined them. The council is about to learn why most species avoid death worlds. It is not because the planets are dangerous. It is because the things that live on death worlds are dangerous. The 30-day deadline that had seemed so threatening when the council announced it suddenly felt like plenty of time. Humans had built an interstellar civilization by turning impossible challenges into advantages. Now they would have the chance to show the galaxy exactly what that meant. Susan Harris approached the group with final preparations. All shipyards are switching to emergency production schedules. Every colony is activating defensive protocols. The council wanted to limit our expansion, but they are about to discover that they have awakened something they should have left sleeping. Jake looked out at the stars visible through the observation windows. Somewhere out there, council fleets were moving toward human space, expecting to find a few scared colonies ready to surrender. Instead, they would find 17 worlds full of people who had spent their entire lives learning how to turn deadly environments into homes. The galaxy was about to remember why humans called Earth a garden world, even though every other species classified it as a death trap. The Council enforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly 29 days after the ultimatum was given. Admiral Threx expected to find human colonies preparing to evacuate or maybe a few desperate defenders making a last stand. Instead, his sensors showed empty space where the orbital stations should have been, and complete silence from the planet below. Threx commanded 400 warships, including massive dreadnoughts that could turn a planet's surface into molten glass. His tactical display showed Frontier's Edge as a typical death world, temperatures that swung from -40 to +60 degrees, frequent volcanic eruptions, an atmosphere full of sulfur that most species could not breathe, and gravity that was 30% higher than galactic standard. "Run a full sensor sweep," Admiral Threx ordered his crew. "Look for any signs of human activity." The sensor operator, a young Zentari with nervous hands, studied his displays carefully. "Sir, the atmospheric interference is making detailed scans very difficult. I am detecting some heat signatures, but they could just be volcanic activity." "Send them the evacuation order," Threx decided. "If they refuse to leave, we will show them what happens when you defy the Council." The message went out on every frequency. "Human colonists of Frontier's Edge, you are violating Council Resolution 7 Alpha. You have 1 standard hour to begin evacuation or face the consequences." The response came from behind the fleet instead, from the planet. "Council ships, this is Captain Steve Walsh of the human vessel Defiant. You are ordered to leave human space immediately." Admiral Threx felt all 4 of his eyes widen as sensors detected a single human ship emerging from what had appeared to be empty asteroid field. The vessel was barely 1/10 the size of his smallest escort ships. "Human ship, you are completely outnumbered. Surrender now and prepare to be boarded." Captain Walsh's reply came with a data transmission that spread through the Council fleets, communication networks like a virus. It was a recording from the Colonial Archives showing the founding of Frontier's Edge. Council officers watched in growing horror as humans worked in conditions that would have killed them in minutes, building structures that could survive earthquakes measuring 8.0 on the standard scale. "Admiral," Walsh's voice continued over the communication channel, "you have made 2 very serious mistakes. First, you assumed we would fight you in space where you have all the advantages. Second, you assumed those were all the ships we have." Asteroid field behind the Council fleet suddenly came alive with activity. What had looked like empty space revealed dozens of human vessels, but these were not warships in any normal sense. Mining ships equipped with industrial cutting lasers, construction vessels with massive mechanical arms, and colony transports that had been quickly fitted with kinetic weapon systems. But the real surprise came from the planet itself. "Sir," a sensor operator's voice cracked with panic. "The planetary surface is launching projectiles at us. From Frontier's Edge, massive railguns that had been disguised as mining equipment began hurling chunks of dense metal ore into space. Each projectile was guided by simple navigation systems and packed with enough kinetic energy to punch through capital ship armor. But more frightening than the weapons was how coordinated the attack seemed to be. Admiral Threx realized with growing terror that the humans had not just been living on this death world. They had turned the entire planet into a weapon. Every mining shaft could be used as a launch tube. Every geological survey station hid sensor arrays and communication equipment. The volcanic activity that made the planet uninhabitable to most species provided perfect cover for human defensive installations. "All ships, return fire. Target the surface installations." The Council fleet's energy weapons struck down at the planet's surface, but their effectiveness was limited by the same atmospheric interference that had hidden the human preparations. Worse, the humans seemed to have planned for this exact response. As soon as the bombardment began, secondary targets across the planet started launching projectiles while the primary installations went dark and moved to new positions. Captain Walsh's voice cut through the chaos of battle communications. "Admiral, you are fighting a species that evolved to survive in places that actively try to kill us every day. Did you really think we would not be ready for this?" The space around Frontier's Edge became a deadly maze of flying metal, energy beams, and exploding ships. The humans fought like nothing Admiral Threx had ever seen before. Their ships moved in unpredictable patterns, using the planet's gravity and magnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds. Their defensive positions on the surface appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking from unexpected angles before vanishing into the volcanic landscape. Most disturbing of all was how the humans used the environment itself as a weapon. They timed their attacks to coincide with solar flares that disrupted Council sensors. They used volcanic eruptions to mask the launch signatures of their railguns. They even managed to redirect several asteroid fragments into collision courses with Council ships. The battle lasted 6 hours and 17 minutes. When it ended, Admiral Threx found himself the senior surviving officer of a fleet that had been reduced from 400 ships to 43 damaged vessels. The humans had lost 12 ships and an estimated 300 people on the planet's surface. But the most disturbing part of the entire engagement was not the tactical defeat. It was the realization that this was only one of 17 human colony worlds, and intelligence reports suggested they were all similarly prepared. As the surviving Council ships limped away from Frontier's edge, Admiral Threx composed a priority message to the Galactic Council. Request immediate reinforcement of all fleet elements. Human defensive capabilities far exceed all previous estimates. Recommend complete strategic reassessment before any further military operations. The message that reached the other human colonies was much simpler. Frontier's Edge sends greetings to our neighbors. The Council fleet decided to visit but left earlier than expected. Governor Martinez suggests they try again during tourist season when the weather is much warmer. Jake Morrison read that message aboard the New Frontier as it coordinated defensive preparations across human space. He could not help but smile despite the seriousness of the situation. The galaxy was about to learn that there was a very good reason most civilized species avoided Deathworlds. Rachel Torres joined him at the communication station with analysis reports from the battle. The Council casualties were 91%. Their energy weapons were almost useless against installations built to survive volcanic activity. Their ships could not maneuver effectively in the gravitational fields that humans use for everyday mining operations. What does this mean for the other colonies? Jake asked. It means the Council is going to have to choose between accepting massive casualties or finding a different approach. Either way, they are learning that Deathworlders do not fight fair, by anyone else's standards. Susan Harris approached with updates from the shipyards. Production is ahead of schedule on all defensive projects. The other colonies are requesting technical specifications for the Frontier's Edge installations. Jake looked at the tactical displays showing human space surrounded by Council territories. They wanted to cage us because they were afraid of what we might become. Now they are going to find out what we already are. The 30-day deadline had passed, and the Council's attempt at enforcement had failed spectacularly. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to discover that when you corner a species evolved on Deathworlds, they do not just fight back, they fight to win. The news of Frontier's Edge spread through Council space like wildfire, but not in the way Admiral Threx had hoped. Instead of creating support for a larger military response, the defeat caused heated arguments in the Council chambers. 3. More species publicly questioned the wisdom of continuing the war with humanity. The trade-focused Mercantile Union, the research-oriented Scholars Consortium, and the nomadic Void Wanderers. Amanda Foster monitored communications from the human embassy ship positioned safely outside Council space. She intercepted fragments of angry debates between Council members. The Aquan representatives demanded immediate escalation and wanted the deployment of the Council's largest dreadnought fleets. But the Korath were openly mocking the Zentari for their embarrassing defeat, while the Nexus Collective had begun performing detailed tactical analyses that painted an increasingly dark picture for any future Council military actions. The humans fight in ways that do not follow standard military doctrine, the primary Nexus node transmitted during one intercepted strategy session. Their defensive capabilities suggest extensive preparation and coordination across multiple worlds. Probability of successful military conquest without catastrophic casualties, 12.7%. Meanwhile, across human space, the 17 colonies were implementing what Admiral Henry Clark had designated as Operation Homecoming. It was not a retreat or a defensive measure. It was a revelation of what humanity had really been building during their 20 years among the stars. On New Terra, Governor Paul Carter stood in the colony's main plaza, addressing both local colonists and a delegation that had just arrived from Earth. Behind him, the city of Nova Angeles stretched across a landscape that would have required full environmental protection suits for most council species to survive even briefly. The human colonists went about their daily business in conditions that required nothing more than basic clothing and breathing masks. For 20 years we have been trying to prove to the galaxy that we belong among the civilized species, Carter said, his words being broadcast simultaneously across all human worlds. We have followed their rules, adopted their diplomatic protocols, and tried to fit into their definition of what civilization should look like. But they have made it very clear that they do not want us to belong. They want us to disappear. On Hades Point, the volcanic mining colony that operated in surface temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Celsius, Supervisor Bill Martinez was giving a very different kind of demonstration. A team of council observers, protected by diplomatic immunity and sealed inside an environmental survival craft, watched in stunned silence as human miners worked directly in conditions that would have melted their protective equipment in seconds. You see, Martinez explained through the communication link, what you call a death world we just call Tuesday morning. We are not trying to be threatening or aggressive. We are just living our lives the way humans have always lived them. The most significant development was happening on Earth itself, where the colonial assembly had been relocated for the first time since the colonies were founded. President Angela Roberts stood before a joint session that included representatives from every human world, but also a growing number of non-council species who had been watching the conflict with great interest. The Korath Confederation has offered a formal military alliance, President Roberts announced to the assembled delegates. They are willing to provide technological support and ship construction assistance in exchange for access to our mining operations on high-gravity worlds that they cannot use themselves. The Nexus Collective has proposed a research partnership to study human adaptability and environmental modification techniques. And perhaps most surprisingly, the ancient Epoch Empire has requested permission to establish a permanent embassy on Earth. Jake Morrison, now serving as military liaison to the Assembly, provided the strategic update that would change everything. Intelligence reports indicate that at least 12 other species have begun openly questioning Council authority since the Frontier's Edge engagement. The Void Wanderers have started conducting regular trade operations with our merchant vessels. 3 minor species have formally requested human protection from what they call unfair Council taxation policies. And the synthetic beings of the Machine Commonwealth have begun broadcasting what they call human survival documentaries as popular entertainment programming. Rachel Torres, the xenobiologist who had spent years studying Council species, stood to address the Assembly with her latest analysis. We are witnessing the complete breakdown of the Council's monopoly on interstellar civilization. They have maintained control for 3,000 years by ensuring that only species with very similar environmental needs could expand freely throughout the galaxy. But we have proven that their model is not the only way to build a successful galactic civilization. The turning point came when Admiral Clark received a priority transmission from a completely unexpected source. The ancient Epoch Empire, which had remained silent observers for most of recorded galactic history, requested a private meeting with human leadership. The Epoch representative arrived on Earth in a ship that was clearly thousands of years old, but still technologically superior to anything the Council possessed. Ambassador Eternal 7 was nearly 3 meters tall, with crystalline skin that seemed to shift colors based on his emotional state. The name was a rough translation from a language that existed before most current galactic civilizations had even developed space travel. Young Deathwalkers, Eternal 7 spoke in perfect English without any trace of an accent. You remind us very much of ourselves in the ancient days, before we learned to fear our own strength and capabilities. The current Council structure has forgotten the most fundamental truth of galactic civilization. Diversity of capability and thought drives innovation and growth, rather than hindering it. President Roberts leaned forward in her chair, immediately recognizing the historical significance of this moment. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador? The Epoch Empire remembers when the galaxy was much younger and far more dangerous than it is today. We remember when species earned their place among the stars through demonstrated strength and adaptability, not through conformity to arbitrary environmental standards established by fear. We propose a complete alternative to the current council structure. The holographic display that materialized between them showed a radically different kind of galactic map. Instead of species organized by arbitrary political boundaries and environmental limitations, this new model showed civilizations grouped by complementary capabilities and mutual benefit relationships. The Galactic Confederation, Eternal 7, continued, his crystalline skin shifting to what appeared to be an excited shade of blue. A completely voluntary association of species based on demonstrated merit and mutual respect, rather than fear and the desire to control others. Humanity would be founding members alongside ourselves, the Korath, the Nexus Collective, and any other species willing to embrace diversity of thought and environmental capability. Jake Morrison felt the enormous weight of galactic history settling on the room like a physical presence. This was no longer just about humanity's place in the galaxy. This was about completely reshaping galactic civilization itself according to entirely different principles. The vote to accept the Epoch Empire's proposal was unanimous, but Admiral Clark had one final question that needed to be answered. What about the existing council structure? They will not simply allow this to happen without some kind of response. Ambassador Eternal 7's crystalline skin shifted to what appeared to be an amused shade of bright blue. The council will have a simple choice to make. Adapt to the new reality that is emerging, or discover firsthand why ancient species learned to respect the kind of strength that comes from surviving in truly hostile environments. As the Epoch ship departed Earth's orbital space, it carried formal declarations from 17 human worlds and carefully crafted messages intended for potential allied species across the galaxy. The age of council supremacy was rapidly coming to an end, and the age of the Galactic Confederation was about to begin in earnest. But first, humanity had to finish the conversation that the Council had foolishly started with their ultimatum. 6 months after the formation of the Galactic Confederation, the original Council found itself facing a crisis that would reshape interstellar politics forever. What had begun as a simple attempt to limit human expansion had evolved into a fundamental challenge to their 3,000-year dominance over galactic civilization. The council chambers on Zentari Prime were in complete chaos as Speaker Prime Zentaxi called desperately for order among the increasingly fractured member species. The great crystalline hall that had once symbolized unity and strength now echoed with angry arguments and bitter recriminations between former allies. 17 species have formally withdrawn from council membership, the Zentari speaker announced, his forearms trembling with barely controlled frustration. The humans have established active trade relationships with 43 non-council civilizations, and now they are offering what they call environmental adaptation assistance to any species willing to expand beyond their traditional comfort zones. Admiral Threx, still bearing physical and psychological scars from his devastating defeat at Frontier's Edge, stood to address the increasingly panicked assembly. Honored delegates, the human threat has exceeded every single projection we made. They are not just defending their existing territory anymore. They are actively recruiting new allies and expanding their sphere of influence across previously unexplored regions of the galaxy. The Aquan delegates' gill slits fluttered rapidly. With visible agitation, the oceanic worlds of the Cerulean systems have formally requested human assistance in deep-sea mining operations on high-pressure worlds. They claim human technology and expertise can access valuable resources that we never even dreamed were possible to extract. What the Council feared most was rapidly becoming reality across the galaxy. Humanity's unique environmental capabilities were proving attractive rather than threatening to other species. The Korath Confederation had tripled their industrial output by partnering with human mining operations on high-gravity worlds that had been considered completely unusable. The Nexus Collective's research capabilities had advanced by what they calculated as several centuries through detailed studies of human adaptability and survival techniques. Even the traditionally isolationist machine Commonwealth had begun incorporating human survival strategies and environmental modification techniques into their core programming. President Angela Roberts stood on the observation deck of the massive orbital station above Earth, watching as ships from dozens of different species came and went from the bustling spaceport that had grown far beyond anyone's original expectations. Beside her, Ambassador Eternal 7 and Korath Trademaster Grimjaw reviewed the latest reports from across rapidly expanding Confederation space. The Sylvani Republic has formally requested full membership in the Confederation, Trademaster Grimjaw reported, his massive frame making even the specially designed human station seem somewhat cramped. They have observed what our joint mining operations have accomplished on their so-called forbidden worlds, and want permanent access to the rare minerals we have successfully extracted from previously unusable planetary surfaces. The Council's entire economic model is collapsing rapidly, Ambassador Eternal 7 observed, his crystalline skin displaying complex patterns that indicated deep satisfaction. For 3 millennia, they have maintained artificial scarcity by declaring vast regions of space completely uninhabitable for any civilized species. The humans have demonstrated conclusively that uninhabitable simply means requiring different survival strategies and technological approaches. Amanda Foster, now serving as Confederation Director of Interspecies Relations, joined the group with the latest intelligence reports from across Council space. The Council is attempting to negotiate some kind of peaceful resolution. They have sent preliminary diplomatic communications through the Scholars Consortium. They are offering to completely rescind the expansion restrictions in exchange for human agreement to limit Confederation membership growth and territorial expansion. Admiral Jake Morrison, recently promoted to overall commander of Confederation, Defense Forces could not help but laugh despite the serious nature of the situation. They still do not understand what this is really about. This was never about territory or access to resources or even military superiority. It was about basic respect and the fundamental right to exist as we naturally are. The final confrontation came not through massive military action or complex diplomatic maneuvering, but through a simple demonstration that would be remembered and discussed across the galaxy for countless generations. The Council had agreed to participate in a formal diplomatic summit on the neutral world of Haven, a planet with carefully controlled environmental conditions that allowed most known galactic species to coexist comfortably in the same physical space. The Confederation delegation arrived aboard the human vessel Resilience, accompanied by escort ships from 6 different allied species, representing completely different environmental needs and capabilities. The summit hall was an impressive marvel of environmental engineering, featuring different atmospheric zones and variable gravitational fields designed to accommodate the specific biological requirements of various species. But when the human delegation entered the facility, they walked directly through the transition zones that other species required for gradual environmental acclimatization, clearly demonstrating their ability to adapt in real time to changing conditions that would have been fatal to most other delegates. Speaker Prime Zentaxi opened the proceedings with a carefully prepared formal statement. The Galactic Council seeks a peaceful and mutually beneficial resolution to the current crisis. We are prepared to offer significant concessions regarding human expansion rights and territorial access. President Roberts stood to respond, flanked by Admiral Morrison and Amanda Foster. Speaker Prime, the Confederation genuinely appreciates the Council's stated desire for peaceful coexistence. However, you seem to fundamentally misunderstand the core issue. This is not about human expansion rights or territorial access. It is about the basic right of all species to develop their natural potential without artificial limitations imposed by others' fears. The demonstration that followed was elegantly simple but profoundly impactful. Rachel Torres, the xenobiologist who had spent years studying Council species limitations and capabilities, presented a detailed holographic display showing comparative environmental tolerances across known galactic species. The data was absolutely undeniable. Humanity's ability to survive in diverse environments was not unique because they were somehow naturally superior, but because they had evolved under conditions that specifically required extreme adaptability. Every species represented in this room has unique capabilities that others completely lack, Rachel explained to the assembled delegates. The Aquans can survive in crushing pressures that would instantly kill most species. The Lumens can exist in pure energy states that would immediately dissipate other life forms. The Korath can function effectively in gravitational fields that would flatten most humanoid species. The fundamental problem is not that humans are different or threatening. The problem is that the Council has created and maintained a system that systematically punishes difference instead of celebrating and utilizing it. Ambassador Eternal 7 stepped forward, his ancient presence commanding immediate attention from every delegate in the massive hall. The Epoch Empire clearly remembers when this galaxy was governed by principles of cooperation and mutual benefit, rather than fear and artificial control. We have decided to provide full support to the Confederation model because it represents a complete return to the principles that once made galactic civilization truly great and innovative. The Council's response was entirely predictable but ultimately futile. They demanded that all Confederation species choose immediately between maintaining Council membership and participating in the new alliance structure. But by that point, 67 species had either joined the Confederation directly or established formal partnership agreements with it. The Council's ultimatum only accelerated their own growing irrelevance across the galaxy. The final irony came when several major Council species quietly requested Confederation assistance in accessing valuable resources on worlds they had previously declared completely uninhabitable. The Aquans wanted human help with deep ocean mining operations on high-pressure worlds. The aerial Stratos species formally requested human assistance in establishing permanent colonies on worlds with severe weather patterns. Even the proud Zentari eventually made discreet inquiries about potential joint mining operations on high-radiation worlds near their home system. Admiral Morrison filed his final military report on the crisis. Recommend official classification of this conflict as concluded. All Council forces have withdrawn from human space, and diplomatic relations have been normalized. The fundamental principle of environmental diversity as a strength rather than a threat has been firmly established across galactic civilization. But it was Jake Morrison's personal log entry that perhaps best captured the true historical significance of these events. Today marks exactly 1 year since the Council attempted to restrict human expansion by declaring us too dangerous for civilizing.